that is a question which is very broad, and I guess I can answer it by talking to you about my experience in different elected fora, in local government, in national government, and indeed in the European Parliament over the last few years. I think there is a crucial role to play for civil society in determining the future course of Europe. And I think a good way of examining that is to look back 50, 60, 70 years ago to the foundations of the European Union. And back then, the EU was the coal and steel community. It was a way for member states, for countries to sell coal and sell steel to each other. And gradually, the union evolved from being an economic entity to having a social and more recently an environmental dimension. And as we have a broader, a more broad reach as an institution, as the European Union, it is crucially important that we listen to the voices of civil society. And I think particularly the civil or the social and the environmental aspects of the European Union have to be deeply informed by the views and thoughts of civil society actors. And I think we do see that making its way into policy. And the kind of debates, the kind of concerns that I would have with the files that I deal with in both the transport and the energy dimension, quite often they start off being perhaps too focused on the economic. And then my role as a legislator is to ensure that the concerns of civil society are heard. For instance, that new trains or buses are accessible to people with disabilities, to make sure that women are represented in decision making, or even in something as simple as crash test dummies, which traditionally are focused on middle-aged men. So it permeates every aspect of policy making within the European Union. And I think we wouldn't have had this European Union Green Deal without civil society and environmental groups saying, look, we're in a climate crisis, we have to act. So I think there is a hugely important role for civil society to play. And the other aspect of this is that we have to have a social transition as well as an environmental transition. And the phrase just transition has been much bandied about, but in very simple terms, that means ensuring that the least well-off in society are not put to one side in the radical changes that climate action will bring over the next few years. And that's certainly a huge part of my role, is to make sure that those voices from civil society are heard and are heard clearly in the mix when it comes to making decisions. And it has to be remembered that there is a lot of hard-nosed lobbying within the European Union, and large companies, multinationals, big tech, big coal, big steel, big gas, they have the power to influence decisions. They literally walk the lobbies, or they certainly did pre-pandemic. These days, it's more Zoom calls and occasional face-to-face meetings, but there is huge power being wielded by fiscal interests, by economic interests in Europe. And I think it's important that civil society not only stands up to that, but builds a compelling vision that allows legislators to strike a balance between these three: economic, social, and economic factors. I think one of the simplest ways of explaining the challenges that are out there, is that everybody fights for their share of face time at a European level, and industry groups are particularly good at finding their way into the room. When I complained early on in this term about the amount of emails and letters I had received from Lufthansa, when I complained about this at a committee meeting, I sat down and then received a tap on my shoulder from a guy saying, "Hi, I'm from Lufthansa, perhaps we could meet." So business interests are in the room. when decisions are being made. And I think it's very important that civil society makes its voice heard, and not in a broad brush way before elections take place or in the run-in to elections, but also when legislation is being put forward. And I think there is a crucial role to play. And it's not an easy one, because it does require a massive amount of resourcing to track files, to see what's going on with the piece of legislation, and to liaise with the relevant political groups and MEPs just when crucial decisions are being made. And I think that is a challenge for civil society to do, but I think it is all important. And particularly at this stage, when we're in a crisis, and using the old Rahm Emanuel line of not letting a crisis go to waste. Certainly, industry groups aren't letting the crisis go to waste, but it's important that civil society doesn't do that either. And I think there continues to be a strong push towards market-led solutions to the climate crisis, certainly. And I think we have to face up to that and say, look, it's not just about putting a price on carbon. We need to ensure that people aren't left behind. And that's where civil society, I think, has a hugely important role to play. And it could be groups lobbying for around the issue of health. It could be around the digital society, where clearly industry is in the room. And even in the response to the pandemic, the kind of debates we've had about making vaccines available to developing countries, it is crucial that civil society is at the table in these debates. But look, I think it is possible to bring about an influence on the kind of the direction of the European project. I think Irish civil society actors, what they maybe lack in funding, they gain in having a group of MEPs who I think are pretty approachable and to understand the importance of face-to-face contact, because they are elected on the basis of people's votes rather than being put on a list by their political party. So I think the Irish voice in Europe is approachable and can be influenced by different groups. And I see examples of that happening, both the good, the bad, or the good, the bad, and the ugly, depending on the issue that is being tackled. That's a really good question. And I would start off by being a little bit critical, because I think civil society groups come to us with lists of what they want to see in the run-in to elections, and it's often a lot quieter after the election is over. And my message there is keep on lobbying, keep in contact, get your message across, whether it be campaigning for improvements in air quality, whether it be looking for improvements in the condition of public housing. The important time is not just right at the election, it's when different pieces of legislation are coming through the European Parliament. So I would say get in there and lobby. I would also say it's not just the European Parliament that should be lobbied, it is the European Commission, the European Council, through the various ministers in each country around Europe, because Irish ministers contribute to European decision-making every month. And it's important to recognize that. And then also to recognize that there are other bodies. There is the Committee of the Regions, where councillors are represented. And there is, of course, the forum, the Conference on the Future of Europe, which will take place over the coming months and indeed years, where a group of people from all 27 countries are putting forward ideas for the future direction of Europe. And members of the public and civil society can influence that. They can put an idea into the mix. They can build bodies of support on that. And if they do it efficiently, it'll end up putting issues onto the European agenda. So the Conference on the Future of Europe is an extraordinary opportunity to get issues onto the table. And then, of course, there is committees like the Petitions Committee of the European Parliament. Now, that is sometimes seen as a place of last resort, but quite often when citizens have campaigned on an issue and met a brick wall, they can go to Europe and lobby the European Parliament and sometimes achieve progress in the right direction. And then there's bodies like the European Union Ombudsman. Emily O'Reilly, an Irish woman, is the Ombudsman. She can help out if there are issues of concern in Ireland. So it's not really about going just to your MEP. There is a whole menu of decision makers. The civil servants within the European Commission, the Irish government ministers who make crucial decisions at European level, councillors who sit on the Committee of the Regions, the members who sit on the Conference on the Future of Europe, a bit like the Citizens' Assembly. So there's lots of ways in which you can bring your influence to bear on European decision making. It's an important time in Europe. Just last week, and I'm talking coming up to the end of July 2021, the European Commission released a list of 12 draft laws called the Fit for 55 or Fit for 2030 package. This is all about trying to reduce the European Union's greenhouse gas emissions by 55% between 1990 and 2030. That's a big reduction over the decade ahead. You can be damn sure that big business is in the room influencing those decisions over the coming months and years. It's really important that civil society is represented there, that small groups, whether they be charities, NGOs, other actors out there in civic space, it's really important to see if they will affect your organization or your members, and if they will, try and push that in the right direction. And I would say that only an engaged citizenry can keep Europe on track. And particularly as we see questions being raised about democracy, about rule of law in Hungary, in Poland, we see judges' freedom being threatened. Even in the UK, we have seen far-right forces having an influence over government policy. So it is a really important time to make sure your voice is heard. And just to quote that old phrase, that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. It has never been more true than today in Europe, where democracy is under threat, and we need to ensure that civil society are engaged and focused on pushing Europe in the right direction.